introduce our MAD advocate speaker, Erin Crawford-Bowers. Erin is on a mission to create a culture of no more victims. As a survivor of a drunk and drug car crash, Erin has spent the last 8 years volunteering with MAD as an executive board member, law enforcement advocate, MAD team captain, and keynote speaker. Erin has helped move the mission forward by sharing her personal story with the justice system and mental health necessity for victims. Now, over the years, she has raised more than $10,000 for MAD South Texas and volunteered countless hours for the cause. Please help me welcome Erin Crawford-Bowers.
All right, thank you guys so much for having me today. It's truly an honor, and I always look forward to this. Almost every single year I get the opportunity to go around Texas, and they always ask, which LER do you want to be a part of? And I'm like, all of them. Can I go to all of them? And they don't let me do all of them. So I'm honored to be here in Austin today to celebrate you guys. I know the sacrifices that you make on a daily basis, and so I think this is truly phenomenal that we get to take the time to tell you guys that we see you and we appreciate you. But for me, I'll be sharing a little bit about my life and how drunk and drug driving had changed the trajectory of my path, and how if not for one woman's selfless actions, statistically, I would not even be here standing in front of you today. Now, my story begins many years ago, and it's all pretty typical stuff. I was born in a small town, South Texas family down in Brazoria, Texas. My mother, Helen Leslie Crawford, was a prominent business owner. She owned a little flower shop at the main intersection of town, and an artist. My father, Joe Allen Crawford, was a local contractor, was a drag racing enthusiast, and known around town, still to this day actually, as the Sheetrock Man. My brother Guy had just turned 14 about 2 days before I arrived, and was not thrilled about spending his birthday in the hospital waiting on me. So let me ask the room real quick. Do we have anybody here who has to share their birthday with a sibling? No, okay, I see a couple hands, yes. Okay, please engage. I don't want to see. Just talk the whole time, don't just listen to me, okay? I get it, I feel your pain, and so you know exactly what I'm talking about. We had to share everything for every birthday, including the cake with both of our names on it. It was awful, but I digress. I'm going to keep going, okay? All right, so the family photo shown here on the screen was taken on June 17, 1985. It's the only family photo that exists and is my most cherished. Everyone is smiling and just enjoying an uneventful evening. At the time, we did not know what was to come a few short days later. On June 22nd, 1985, my father had just finished a large contracting job down in Lake Jackson, Texas. Luckily, the whole family had gotten together, come from all over to go to dinner that night. And then everything pretty typical. We wrap up, we get in the car, go home, just like it's any other night. My dad was driving home that evening while my teenage cousin was in the rear passenger seat behind my father. My mother was sitting beside my cousin in the rear passenger side. And then being that it was 1985, I was in this metal contraption that they actually called a car seat in some of the news articles. And they put it like it was a brand new thing back then. And so I'm hoping that we all learned things since the 80s, hopefully we'll see, Our car seats have gotten a little bit better, we don't ride front, all the good things. But I'll spare you the disturbing details of what happened next, though essentially there was a man high on cocaine and driving erratically down a dark country road. My mother, concerned about what may happen, threw off her seatbelt and lunged in front of me to brace for the impact. According to the first responders, statistically, everyone in the front seat should have died, and everyone in the back seat should have survived that night. If not for my mother's selfless actions that night, I would not even be standing here in front of you today. Upon impact, my father died instantly, and my cousin suffered a plethora of broken bones and spent over 6 months in the hospital. I was life-flighted that night to Galveston UTMB, and they weren't sure I was going to make it. I had concussion, damages to my spine and my neck, broken bones, but I was alive. My mother, on the other hand, was thrown into the windshield. They say she died about 2 minutes later. The first person on the scene said that when he approached our vehicle, he thought everyone was dead. based on the silence and the gore that he witnessed. The man that hit us was arrested and taken to the hospital for a blood draw. As usual, he suffered no injuries. So what do you think a person's life is worth, right? You would believe I would go on to say what kind of justice my family got, or the support that we had, or we went to all these counseling sessions, or we had so much, everybody just standing behind us. But unfortunately, that's just not how my story is told. You see, the man's grandfather was a district county judge in Brazoria County, and magically, that blood draw was lost. And in this room, I'm sure that many of us see this time and time again. Unlike my situation in 1985, you make the arrest, you do the paperwork, you document the evidence properly, you get everything right, and the offenders just slip through the cracks. I understand your frustration and the anger that you have to deal with every single day, and I applaud you for your continued efforts in your community. You push forward, you try to save another life, and you are making a difference selflessly. But the man that killed my parents was sentenced to 3 months in jail and only served 3 weeks, while the remaining survivors were left to serve the life sentence we were all dealt. But my brother Guy paid the highest price. He was 14 that summer of '85 and about to be a freshman in high school. Such a pivotal moment in his life, completely shredded. For years, he would relive that night over and over and over again like it was the day before. It truly haunted who he was. And while my brother may not have been in the car with us physically that night, my brother died on June 22nd, 1985 as well. The brother he was supposed to be. It just took his body 35 years, 11 months, and 18 days to succumb to those injuries. But immediately after the wreck, my mother's sister, Jeannie Logston, packed a bag and moved in to her dead sister's home. She knew my mother wanted us to be raised in the house that my father built with his own hands and was on a mission to continue my mother's legacy. She walked away from a little oil and gas company at the time called Exxon, took over my mother's flower shop, and slept in her dead sister's bed every single night. She never changed one thing in that house and lived there for over 20 years, selfless. I actually had the honor, it's not in my speech because I wasn't sure she was going to make it today, but for the first time, she's actually hearing me speak. And so, Mom, if you could stand up real quick, and Red can help me give her a round of applause. Delbert Logston had been with Houston PD for almost 20 years in 1985. Being that Brazoria was about 90 minutes away from Houston, he decided during the week he was going to live in Houston and go to work and then come home on the weekends. But that only lasted, of course, a couple of years as he wanted me to have a father figure full-time in my life. So every day he woke up at 4 a.m. to go into Houston to earn a salary that kept that flower shop in business for all of those years. In total, he served Houston PD for over 44 years before retiring to help raise my babies, his grandchildren. Selfless. And over the years, I've had many milestones in my own life. I graduated, I got married to my husband, Chris. I have 2 beautiful children, Crawford and Addison, and Crawford is actually named after my parents. My life is very full, though the other day I had something happen that I wanted to share because I think we as a society don't talk about it enough. So you don't have to raise your hand because I know we're a bunch of tough guys and we're here, you know, in our uniforms, but I'm gonna still ask it anyway because I think it's a good hypothetical question. Has anyone ever unexpectedly cried in public and just didn't see it coming? Okay, I'm gonna raise my hand just because, okay, we got a couple of ladies, so we're good with this, right? Okay. So to take you back a few weeks ago, my kids were attending a summer camp. And the last day, they had all the parents come out. You know, you guys, I'm sure a lot of your parents, you know what I'm talking about. You come out, you see what all the kids have learned. And as I'm sitting there, there's like hundreds of parents, because it's a very predominant summer camp in New Braunfels, and so tons of people. And then all these kids start coming in with their little groups, and I look up and I see my 10-year-old son, Crawford, making his way to the stage, and he's just bobbing his head, trying to find me in the crowd. And when our eyes met, you would have thought that he hadn't seen me in years. He smiled so big, and he was just waving. He's like, Mom, Mom, Mom. And I had dropped him off that morning. Like, it had only been like 5 hours, right? And I'm like, okay, don't make a scene, it's fine. Yes, I see you. Hi, yes, okay. And then about a few minutes later, I see my 6-year-old daughter come in, and she has this look on her face where it's just worry. Like, it looked like she was about to start tearing up, and she's just looking around, cannot find me. And I'm just sitting there, and I'm like trying to go, okay, right here, you know? And instantly, when our eyes met, the worry just washed off of her face, and she was overjoyed. Gave me the biggest smile and just could not stop waving, like I couldn't even see her. It was really funny. And then out of nowhere, I burst into tears. And again, 0 plans to cry. I was in shorts, a t-shirt, I didn't have my purse, I had absolutely nothing with me. But I'm trying not to make a scene, you know, and so I'm like trying to hide it. And because I was taught at a young age, you know, if you cry in public, you're always just going to kind of keep it on the down low as much as possible, not to draw too much attention. And I questioned myself in that moment because I'm like, why am I crying? Like, this is such a happy, normal thing for a parent to do. Like, what is the deal? And I couldn't stop. And I was like, what the hell, you know? Pull it together. And then it took me about a week, and I was meeting with my therapist, and I'm like, I just don't understand. And we start talking about it, and I realized that there was this core memory that this had drug up, that this setting had made me remember, that I had just long blocked out, because I'm really good at that, and my therapist hates it. And I was about my son's age. I was about 10 years old, and I was sitting at a summer camp. It was a basketball camp, and I remember very vividly looking around the room in the sea of parents, scanning the audience diligently, knowing they would not be in the audience, but oh, still so hopeful. I thought back to all the times in my life I looked around the room, wide-eyed, searching, hoping to see them, wishing to meet their eyes with a big smile and lots of waves, though I never do. Every moment filled with a tinge of sadness because my eyes will never meet theirs again. And that is what Under the Influence driving has taken from my life. I will never know the sound of my parents' voices. I will never hear an I love you or I'm proud of you from either one of them, and that's what keeps me up at night. But for my brother Guy, it was almost the opposite, right? He was 14 years old, and he could remember. He remembered their hugs, their voice, their sense of humor, and he longed to be with them so much so that his mental health crumbled over the years. In 2020, I became his guardian and was given medical authority over all of his mental health decisions. I was 35 and he was 49 at the time. And I'll also spare this room the details of how our mental health system is so incredibly broken, because I see the heads, I know, you all know. Though you're gonna see this, see on the screen a couple of pictures of him, and then there at the bottom, that's the last thing he wrote before he thoughtlessly but intentionally grabbed a rope. He wasn't found until the next day. And that's the first time I truly felt what it was like to be powerless. And sometimes I just feel like an imposter in my own life. You know, I know this story that I shared with you today is brutal, but on most days, the off thing is, I'm so incredibly grateful. I'm grateful that it happened to me. And I tell my adopted parents all the time, while there have been moments of sadness, I would not have changed one thing. Because I can use our story to bring awareness, to help other victims, to ensure no child ever has to go through what I went through, or that nobody has to ever have their babies without their mom by their side, or not be walked down the aisle by their dad, or lose their only sibling to suicide. Then I've done what I've set out to do. So I'll leave you with this last thought. When you think of me, know that I am not a victim of my own life. What I went through pulled a warrior out of me, and it is my greatest honor to be her. Thank you.